Welcome to Inside Israel, everyone. This is episode 103 entitled Over with a question mark after that, because as everyone in Israel knows, what we're talking about right now, the end of this ordeal that began on October 7th, 2023, it feels like it is over, but we cannot know for sure if it's over. It's not over until it's completely over, hence the question mark in the title. Coming to you tonight from my home away from home, Marble Falls, Texas, where I just may be the only Jew in town. And this really is a historic episode. You know, I began this podcast right after October 7th, and the whole idea was to guide you through it, to show you what it was like to be Israeli during the most challenging time in Israel's history. And so one question could be, has the purpose of this podcast come to a close now that we've reached a ceasefire and hostages are coming home? And as I'll explain more at the end, I actually believe that the work really is just beginning in terms of what Israel will look like down the road. And my goal on this podcast moving forward is to keep you abreast of everything that Israel and Israelis that we go through as we figure out what this new vision of Israel is going to be. Because until now, we knew exactly what the mission was. Whatever side of the aisle you were on, wherever you stood politically, we all wanted to defeat Hamas and to bring the hostages home. Well, now that the hostages are home, what does Israel look like? What are the biggest challenges? What are the Israeli people going to choose for ourselves moving forward as we have an election exactly 1 year from now? So I hope you'll continue to stay tuned to this podcast as I do my best to bring you the insider's perspective of what it's like to live in Israel and raise a family there and go through this next period that awaits us. Even if once in a while I'm broadcasting to you from Marble Falls, Texas, or as I will be in future weeks, Chicago, Cleveland, Fort Lauderdale, and all the other places I will be on tour. So again, this is historic, what we are going through right now. And just to be perfectly upfront and transparent about the time that we are at the moment, I'm recording this late, or you might say early Monday morning, Israel time, before the hostages have been released. It's scheduled to begin within hours. By the time this drops on Wednesday on Apple and on Spotify, please God, this will have actually happened. The hostages will have all been released. And I'm speaking to you on the strong assumption that that is what is going to happen. And what I want to do in this episode, sure, I will briefly explain what the ceasefire agreement is, but that's really not the main purpose. I think you can get the details in other places. What I really want to do is just leave you with some concrete takeaways about what happens next. And also to be clear, I got a lot of questions over the weekend from you guys. Most of the questions are going to be answered in the broadcast itself. So I'm not going to directly take questions because so many of them were similar. Do we trust Hamas? What does this mean for Bibi's political future, etc.? And I think that will all come out as we move forward. So let's begin with the agreement itself. It's supposed to happen in stages, this ceasefire. The most important part for Israelis is stage one. This is where all of the hostages, living and dead, are returned home. And we're talking about 20 living hostages at this point. They are all expected to be released within hours of this broadcast. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, then again, hopefully it's already happened, but they're expected to be released in one batch early Monday morning. And the other part of this early stage is that the IDF withdraws from the major urban centers to what's called the yellow line within Gaza. And of course, it's the release of certain what's known in the press as security prisoners, Palestinian security prisoners. We call them criminals. I mean, these are people with blood on their hands, many serving multiple life sentences for the planning of the deaths of Israelis or the murder of Israelis. Why the media calls them security prisoners, as if all they were doing was eavesdropping or something else, is beyond me. These are hardened through and through terrorists. But in any case, we have to acknowledge this is part of the deal as well, the release of a certain number of them, and of course, aid flowing into the Gaza Strip. Later parts of the deal are going to deal with the disarming of Hamas, the future governing of Gaza, a full withdrawal of the IDF from the Gaza Strip. But for the time being, what's really important for you to keep in mind is that the IDF is still in Gaza. In fact, we control over 50% of the territory in Gaza right now. We control just about everything except the urban areas. Most of the urban areas have been destroyed. 90% of the urban areas have been destroyed. So essentially, the IDF is still in Gaza. And this leads us to takeaway number one. Did we win? As someone who lives in Israel, who's been to Shiva calls for soldiers, I personally have been to one funeral for an IDF soldier. Dorit has been to a funeral for a hostage who was killed there. She's made multiple Shiva calls. I mean, from that point of view, there's no way to say we won. It feels like a loss no matter what. When we're talking about 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7th, 500 IDF soldiers killed just since October 7th in Gaza, and about 1,000 total killed, including October 7th. It's hard to use words like victory or win. That said, I think it's really important to recognize that the conditions that are being put in place right now really do heavily favor Israel. And what am I talking about? Well, number one, just the fact that we're getting all of the hostages out and the IDF is still inside Gaza. You know, Hamas for a long time, their major condition was that the IDF complete a full withdrawal from Gaza before any hostages were released. And here we have the IDF controlling over 50% of Gaza and remaining in there for the time being, and the hostages are being let out. We're also seeing a lot of world awareness about just who Hamas is. You know, say what you want about a recognition of a Palestinian state. It definitely came too soon. You can't recognize a Palestinian state while there are still hostages being held. Say what you want about the protests. I mean, there were protests over the weekend in Europe calling for the end of the war. I mean, the war is essentially over, but what they were saying is it's not enough. They're going to hate Israel no matter what. Say what you want about all of that. The fact of the matter is, the leaders of the world are all on board that Hamas can have no part in the future of Gaza. And this is a change. I think 2.5 years ago, some world leaders might have recognized Hamas as freedom fighters who were just trying to right a wrong. Maybe they were too extreme in their actions, but they were standing up for the Palestinian people, etc. There are no world leaders right now, at least normalized ones, who are claiming that. They all face huge Muslim, let's just say, challenges in their own countries. They know what Hamas is and what Hamas stands for. And so, in a sense, Hamas has lost on this front as well, that none of the world supports them. The world supports the idea of a Palestinian state, but they support that without Hamas being involved. These world leaders are also talking about peace as a two-state solution. And when you say two states, yeah, that means a Palestinian state. But that also means a Jewish state. No one here is questioning Israel's right to exist. And I know that sounds silly because there's really no other country in the world where the country's right to exist is so often brought into question. But just the fact that world leaders are talking about Israel as part of a two-state solution, where one of those states is the Jewish state, it means that we are normalized, we are recognized. There's still a lot of damage that we need to correct. Our reputation has suffered. But the fact that the IDF is still in Gaza, the hostages are coming out, and the world recognizes, at least the important people, that Hamas has no place in Gaza's future. This is a major victory for Israel. There's no other way to classify it. Now, that leads us to takeaway number 2. Why did this happen? For a long time, I said that I was against further military action in Gaza, that I thought we should have made a deal a while ago. And it wasn't just me saying this. I mean, the chief of staff of the IDF did not want to conquer Gaza City. Many former and current members of the security establishment in Israel were saying that continuing the war was unnecessary. However, in one of his speeches this past week, Bibi mentioned that Hamas had no choice because the sword was on their neck. And I really do have to say that I agree with Bibi here. Those of you who followed me on this podcast know that I do not like Netanyahu for many reasons. But I'm also willing to say when he was right and also when to acknowledge when I and the rest of us were wrong. And we were wrong on this. I think when Bibi and the war cabinet made the decision to conquer Gaza City, it sent a signal to Hamas that the leverage you think you have by holding hostages, it's actually not leverage at all. We are going to conquer you anyway, even if it means killing our hostages in the process. And of course, we would try not to. But we sent a signal to Hamas that we are still, and I used this phrase, I think, last episode or 2 episodes ago, that we are still badass Israel, that we are unpredictable, that we are brash, that we are capable of doing crazy things that you would not expect. And I think Hamas was completely caught off guard when we opted to and then began to conquer Gaza City. And they saw that if we continue doing that, it would be the end of them. They're near the end anyway, but they still have a tunnel network beneath Gaza City. They still have weapons that they're hoping to hold on to and somewhat of a reputation in Gaza. And all of that would be lost if we completely decimated Gaza City. So I have to tip my cap here to Bibi. And even though I don't like him as a politician or necessarily as a human being, I can acknowledge that he was right and he saw something that others didn't. And as a side note to all of you who may not follow Israeli politics over the years, one of Bibi's biggest strengths has always been his claim that he understands the Arab mentality better than other Israeli politicians, that other Israeli politicians are naive and they think that the Arabs will sit down at the table and negotiate and walk away happy. Whereas Bibi has always said that he understands the Arab mentality. And I got to say, in this case, he does. The Arab mentality, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, even when I didn't agree with the idea of conquering Gaza City, the Arab mentality is one that responds to power, to violence, to bold action, and to humiliation. And we have been on the brink of crushing and humiliating Hamas. And they saw what we did to Hezbollah, and they saw what we did to Iran. And this idea of the message that we're sending to the Arab world, maybe that message got to Hamas as well. And they saw that we meant business. So why is this agreement happening now? Definitely Trump, who I do believe deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Again, I'm not a Trump fan by any means, but you've got to give credit where credit is due. There's only one person in the world who could have made this happen, and Trump is that guy. His crazy negotiating style helped make it happen. And let's not discount the American attack on the nuclear reactor in Iran, which also showed a message to Hamas that we mean business. So it's Trump's negotiating style and Trump, the idea that he was able actually to make this happen. And Bibi's decision to move forward into Gaza City. I don't think Hamas would have given up what they're giving up had the, like Bibi said, sword not been on their neck. So this leads us to question number 3. What does this mean for Bibi politically? We have elections slated for 1 year from now. I think in in October, late October, November 2023, it would have been unthinkable that Bibi could even stand a chance at winning in the next elections. Look, the polls in Israel still show that most people, by far the majority, over 60%, believe that Bibi should step down immediately, believe that he is ultimately responsible for October 7th, believe that there should be an independent commission to examine how and why October 7th happened. That said, Bibi's reputation is better now than it was 2 years ago, and probably better now than it has been at any point in the past 2 years. And while on the one hand, he is the one that October 7th happened on his watch, he's also the one who can say, I was able to bring home the hostages. I was able to bring the war to an end and to bring a new governance to Gaza that does not involve Hamas. He's a very clever, smart, and wily politician. A year is a long time, especially in this age of social media when everything seems immediate and the 24-hour news cycle. So don't count him out just yet. I don't have a prediction for you. Other than that, as the title of this podcast says, it's not over. Nothing is over. Point number 4. What happens to all the anti-Israel sentiment around the world? Well, as we saw over the past weekend, there was a big demonstration in Bern, Switzerland, with a lot of destruction as well. The breaking of storefronts and the torching of, I believe, torching of cars and stores. In London, there was an anti-Israel protest. Again, the vibe being that Israel is colonizers, river to the sea, that this peace agreement, ceasefire doesn't go far enough. And what they really want, we are all seeing the stripes, their true stripes, their true colors. What they want is no Israel at all. So these are not normalized protesters. I don't want to use the word prediction, but my feeling is that a lot of the anti-Israel sentiment is going to die down. I've always said here that I thought there was an element of trend to it, an element of progressive, woke, hipness to it. I don't think you're going to see the movements on college campuses, also because campuses are cracking down, but also it's just not as trendy anymore. And I think in a year from now, 2 years from now, it will be largely, I don't want to say forgotten, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as high, nearly as loud and vociferous as it has been up until now. I think a lot of the anti-Israel protest has been due to the images we've all been seeing of the war in Gaza and the devastation. And new things will take their place. New images, new news stories. Every country has its own troubles, and I wouldn't be surprised if troubles relating to Muslim populations in other countries becomes part of the headlines. So one prediction or one foresight that I do want to offer is I could see many right-wing parties and politicians winning elections throughout Europe in the coming years. That's one reaction you might see to all of this, because I think a lot of these populations, the silent majority, are very frightened of what the Muslim populations in their own countries are doing and what they're capable of doing. Now, of course, those who hate Israel always will hate Israel, and nothing will change that, but they do need a certain amount of support and fuel to keep that hatred in the news cycle. And with the war being over, or mostly over, I think a lot of that will lose steam. I hope I'm right on this one. Let's talk about damage to Israel on a reputation level. To me, this is a big problem. I think right now what you have is a generation of young people who for 2 years have been seeing images of Israel as the genocidal killer of Gazans. That word, even though it's wrong, genocide, it's stuck. The same way apartheid has been attached to South Africa, and even though apartheid officially has been over for many years, I grew up during that era of apartheid South Africa, and I still associate apartheid with South Africa. I am afraid to say that I think Israel will have the stain of the genocide label attached to it for a certain segment of the population. We need to change our image in the world. And the way to do that is not with better social media videos. It's not by saying that we brought the world the cherry tomato and cell phones and instant messaging and ways. I think it needs to be more of a soft PR, meaning we need our physicians to attend medical conferences around the world and present amazing research findings so that other physicians will see just what kind of cutting edge medical technology Israel is bringing to the world. We need to keep inventing and rolling out incredible high tech and for our entrepreneurs to network with other smart high tech entrepreneurs from around the world. That is how the impact will be made. We need Hillels on college campuses to be really strong and really positive, not just on the Israel front, but in the tikkun olam front, the idea of doing good works that make the world better so that Jews and Israel can be associated with positive things. That is how our reputation needs to change. But to me, this is a war that is not over. This is a battle that is just beginning. The battle for Israel's reputation, and by extension, the reputation of Jews around the world. This is where we need our smartest people to put our heads together and really think of what the plan is, because we literally have not had a plan until now. I'd be curious to hear from you, the listeners, what you think we should do. And this is one place where I'm going to ask you to email me, joelchasanoff.com. Very easy to contact me through that. Drop me a note. Tell me what you think we need to do to repair Israel's image. Because I have a feeling that some of the smartest people in the world when it comes to Israel and Israel's future are in my listening audience and in the audiences of other podcasters who talk about Israel on the level I do. We want to hear from you as well. So the last point is, what are Israelis saying right now? What are they feeling? Well, the obvious emotion, the word that you see a lot is joy. That Israelis are feeling joy that the hostages are finally coming home. And you see dancing in Kikar Hatuvim, Hostage Square. You see people literally in tears. We're seeing videos right now of families readying the rooms in their homes, the homes of hostages, to get ready for their loved ones to come back, hospitals getting ready. We do feel joy. But there are two other things that we're feeling as well. One is, if there's a word out there that could mix relief with closure, is there a word? That's what we are feeling. Because for us, in a way, it's still October 7th of 2023. We've been going out our regular daily lives. We've been going to restaurants and to work and to school and to the movies and comedy clubs, but it's never left us. For as long as there have been hostages there, it's been going on. On the radio, I listen to Galgalatz 91.8, and you can get their app if you want to listen to them, their live broadcasts if you're outside of Israel. GALGALATZ. Just put in Galgalatz. Every hour on the hour, they give the news, and then they have a message. Someone comes on and says, Lo mitraglim ad shekulam chozrim, which means we are not going back to normal life until everyone comes home. And we've heard this literally on the hour, 24 hours a day for 700 plus, let's just say 2 years and 13 days at this point. So the idea of the hostages coming home, it's not just joy, it's a sense of euphoric relief. The first image that came to mind, those of you who have kids, if you've ever lost track of your kid in a big place, like an amusement park or even a regular park, and, I remember incidents from when my kids were little where, maybe for 20 minutes at the park, I could not spot my kid. I took my eyes off them for a second. And then finally, 20 minutes later or whatever, I found them again. It wasn't just joy. It was almost this sense of something coming to an end, the exhalation. Not in any way to compare, but just to give you the sense of emotion. That's what it is for us as well. We've been holding this emotion inside us, and we're finally able to bring a sense of closure. And look, we're not naive. We know that Hamas is not just going to lay down their AK-47s and RPG launchers willfully and with a smile on their face and offer us their hands. We know there's more to come. But the hostages coming home brings in a much needed sense of closure that we haven't experienced for 2 years. So that is the first thing that we are feeling. The second is a sense of anxiety about what's to come. In the back of our minds is what is ahead for our country now that this main obstacle is over. This is a time for surveys. With all the hostages coming home and the ceasefire, all these surveys are being done. And in one of the most poignant survey questions I saw, I believe it's close to 70% of Israelis, to well over 60%, close to 70% of Israelis believe that the biggest threat to Israel is what I've been telling you on this podcast is the biggest threat. It's the internal threat, the division among us, which is really incredible that with Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, protests around the world, that we would think the biggest threat to our country is ourselves. And just under 70% of Israelis believe it is. And we're anxious right now about how our country is going to come together. What happens with this 13% of the population, the ultra-Orthodox, who are still not serving in the IDF, but still continue to receive the monetary subsidies for their daycare centers and to study in yeshiva and to not work? What happens to that question? What happens to judicial reform, this movement to pretty much completely neuter the Supreme Court of Israel so that there is no final check on the executive and legislature, who are always in sync in Israel? The way the laws work in Israel, legislature and executive are always in sync. What happens in the West Bank, where we have Jewish settlers regularly attacking Palestinians and torching their homes and destroying their property, and by order of the minister of police in Israel, not being punished? These are all the questions that are on our minds right now. Never mind the more domestic questions, like the fact that economically, Israelis are struggling at a very high rate because of the number of days of reserve military service that many men and some women have been doing. We're talking 400, 500 days of reserve military service. That means businesses collapsing. It means salaries lost. It means kids with PTSD from not having a parent around and from being in the bomb shelter so often this past summer during the attacks via Yemen and Iran. Another poll, I keep talking about polls, but another one talked about what it's done to marriages in Israel and how a higher rate than really, I think, ever of married couples have said that they've discussed divorce or have been pushed to the brink of divorce because of the toll that military reserve service and the war in general has taken on marriages. Not to mention the number of disabled soldiers that we have. Physically, permanently disabled, over 2,000, I believe, is a number, without legs, arms, eyes, some still in comas with head injuries, plus the PTSD. We're talking expected at some point eventually to reach 30,000 cases of PTSD among IDF soldiers when all is said and done. These are the questions that are on our minds right now. So yes, there is that sense of euphoric joy and relief, but there's also the questions of what does this country look like now moving forward? No one can make predictions, and anyone who tells you they have a prediction, don't believe them, because we really do not know. Nobody can. But I encourage you to stay engaged. I encourage you to get your news from sources other than just American sources. And this loops back to what I said at the beginning of, does this podcast have a purpose? Now that in many ways the reason for starting it has found a little bit of closure. And I would say yes, more than ever, because now really the big questions, the questions that we didn't even realize were questions, are now going to be brought to the forefront as we move ahead. So I hope you'll keep tuning in. I hope I can keep providing, if not answers, at least context and background for you. Over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to be in the US. I encourage you to say hi to me on the road. My tour schedule is at joelchasnoff.com/shows. 3 shows I have coming up that I really do want to highlight are fundraisers for the Michael Levin Lone Soldier Center in Israel. I'm doing shows in Penn Valley, PA, and Ben Salem, PA, and Sharon, Massachusetts. This is the Philadelphia area and the Boston area, plus many other shows along the way. And in addition to these shows, also lectures just about the state of Israel right now. I'm calling these Inside Israel Live, where it's pretty much the podcast, but frontal, right in front of you. So check the tour schedule, come on out, say hi, and you can always contact me again through the website, joelchasnoff.com. If you want to tell me what you want to hear about as Israel moves forward, or if you want to answer my question that I'd asked you earlier, which is how do we repair Israel's very maligned PR reputation right now? Our next live broadcast, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is subject to change, but for the time being, the next live broadcast will be next Sunday, the 19th of October at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So our normal tour schedule time. That could change depending on an event I have that day. I believe it's in the afternoon, and that it will let me out on time to reach all of you. If that does need to change, I'll let you know with enough notice. Stay tuned to broadcast schedules and all the other news through my newsletter, Hebrews Magic. You can sign up for that at joelchasnoff.com. And also, I'm posting a lot on Instagram these days. If you are on social media, Facebook or Instagram, real easy, just at symbol Joel Chasnoff. Not just comedic stuff, but also insights, snippets from this podcast and other insights about life in Israel as well. Thank you so much for joining on this really historic week for the state of Israel and Jews around the world. I so look forward to seeing you next week, a week from now, and digesting together, hopefully, what will have been wonderful, wonderful news. Until then, lehitraot, rak b'shalom. Bye, everyone.